News coming in this evening. New jobless claims fell below 1 million last week. It's the first time since the pandemic began in March. Could the expiration of enhanced unemployment be helping? A local council revokes a New Jersey gym's license. It says the gym endangered public safety by refusing to lock down. We spoke with one of the owners. Apple wants to raise money while it's cheap and buy back its own stock. The Federal Reserve will likely help. And top economic advisor Larry Kudlow says the U.S. is investigating China's loans in Latin America. We have the details. Good evening and thanks for tuning in. The number of Americans filing for unemployment fell below 1 million last week. It's the first time since the height of the lockdowns in March. Back then, weekly filings were at nearly 7 million.
The U.S. Labor Department says 963,000 Americans filed for unemployment last week. Economists predicted over 1 million claims, so the number is a positive surprise. Still, markets reacted with little enthusiasm, with the S&P 500 and the Dow Jones dipping on open. The expiration of the extra $600 weekly unemployment benefit could be driving the drop. It likely discouraged some people from filing for unemployment. After negotiators failed to reach an agreement on extending the jobless supplement last week, President Trump signed an executive order that prolongs it. The order extends the benefit, but at a reduced level, and it could take some time to set up. Another bright spot is that the total number of people receiving unemployment dropped by over 3 million to just over 28 million. While the drop is a good sign, over 26 million more Americans were receiving unemployment compared to the same time last year. And while the U.S. economy added over 1.7 million jobs in July, so far only around 40% of the jobs lost due to the shutdowns have come back. But White House economic advisor Larry Kudlow is more optimistic. On Thursday, he said he expects the U.S. unemployment rate to drop to single digits as early as this month.
Mail-in voting remains one of the key sticking points in stimulus talks. There's no sign of finding agreement today either.
Negotiations between the White House and Democrats are at a standstill on the next virus aid package.
I can just tell you right now it's a stalemate. And as Secretary Mnuchin said yesterday, Speaker wants a $2 trillion commitment from us. We're not going to give it. There are too many things, too many asks on their side that don't fit. They don't even have anything to do with COVID for that matter.
The bill's not going to happen because they don't even want to talk about it, because we can't give them the kind of ridiculous things that they want that have nothing to do with the China virus.
Both sides mentioned a key issue which differentiates the bills from Democrats and Republicans.
But so obsessed are they to undermine absentee voting that this is their connection there. So the president says he's not putting up any money for absentee voting, and he's not putting up any money for the Postal Service.
But President Trump says an election entirely run on mail-in ballots could be a catastrophe.
There's a big difference between absentee ballots and mail-in ballots, and the harvesting that goes with it, and the lack of any credibility. You don't even have to sign your name. You don't even have to have an ID with a picture. He doesn't like that, and I think he's correct on that. The potential for fraud is just gigantic.
It'll be the greatest rigged election in history. It'll be the greatest fraud ever perpetrated, other than perhaps what they did to my campaign, where they spied on my campaign. My executive order.
President Trump says there shouldn't be a problem holding traditional elections. He mentioned on Fox News that elections took place during both world wars.
And a council in New Jersey is revoking a local gym's license. Authorities, including the state's governor, say the gym repeatedly broke lockdown restrictions and by doing so put public health in danger. But the gym's owners say that's not the case and there's no evidence to back it up. The owners were even arrested last month but still refused to close the gym. I spoke with one of them just now. Ian, great to see you. Thanks for taking the time to come on and speak with us.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Ian, you were at the council meeting earlier this week. Was there much debate? Did you get a chance to speak before they handed down the verdict?
Well, we were informed that before the council meeting, we were informed that the vote was going to be 5-1, and that vote just happened to be 5-1. When we went there was very little debate. They didn't really present anything other than the fact that we have criminal charges against us. but those charges are unresolved, and because they're unresolved, we can't speak on those charges openly. So we weren't even really able to defend ourselves. Our lawyer did try and put forth an argument that some evidence had to be put forth that our gym is a threat to the community, and they didn't hear that request. We even asked for just a temporary stay for a week so that the state and the township could present some sort of hard evidence, some science and some data that shows that a tourist in Belmar poses any threat to the public. And they did not want to hear that. They allowed him to state that argument, but very quickly after they moved right to a vote. They did not allow the public to speak, and then they voted 5-1, just as we were told they would.
How did you know it was going to be 5-1?
Somebody privy to that knowledge inside the town came in and told us, and they were exactly right.
And you said, so you have no idea what the specific criminal charges are against you?
No. The criminal charges, the reasoning for them revoking the business license, they said that we broke the law. And what they were speaking about was the violations of executive orders and disorderly persons that we were charged with and still not convicted of as a result of opening the gym.
And I see on your Instagram page, this isn't, it isn't the last chapter for you. Number one, is the gym still open? And number two, do you think the law is on your side moving forward?
Our facility is still open, and it will remain open until we are presented with some evidence that shows that we pose a threat to the general public. We've asked for that information openly, and we will be asking for that information in court coming this Friday and moving forward. As far as the rest goes, we do believe that the Constitution is on our side. We don't believe that the laws that have been written are on our side because we believe that they are violations of the Constitution, and especially the executive orders. There's been a radical shift in the way that these governors and these elected officials rule over us, and I think the problem with that is that they think that they rule over us, and they forget that their first and their primary objective is to uphold our rights guaranteed in our state and in our federal constitution. So we do believe in the end that we will win because we are arguing constitutional arguments.
Ian, we'll definitely keep track of the story and appreciate you taking the time out of your day. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Not much news in the markets today. Tesla is up over 4%. Cisco, though, down more than 11% on the back of disappointing earnings. All in all, the Dow Jones fell about 80 points or 0.29%. S&P 500 lost 7 points or 0.20%. The Nasdaq added 30 points or 0.27%. And Apple wants to raise money to buy back its own stock. The company is preparing its second bond issuance since May. Hasn't borrowed twice in 1 year since 2017. Apple is taking advantage of the current economic environment. The Federal Reserve is still aggressively buying both government bonds and corporate bonds. This makes it much cheaper for Apple to raise money right now. Even the Fed itself will likely buy some of the company's new bonds. It's bought Apple bonds 8 times in the last 2 months. Once Apple buys back the shares, the value of the company will increase, a boost for its shareholders. The top White House economic advisor Larry Kudlow says the U.S. is investigating China's investments in Latin America. He says China's influence there is concerning and the U.S. is ready to help its neighbors to the south.
Larry Kudlow, director of the U.S. National Economic Council, affirms that the U.S. is investigating questionable Chinese loans in Latin America.
And that's why we are monitoring Chinese investment and will presumably share our information with all of our friends in Latin America to keep an eye on China.
He says China is a subverting force right now, and they have to be watched very carefully.
There's a whole list of problems with the China story. They want to come in and invest, so they say, and loan cheap money, which is not cheap.
But Kudlow says the U.S. is helping out Latin America with investment projects and keeping a close watch on China with the Committee on Foreign Investment in the United States.
We have continued to work with our Latin American neighbors on a number of projects. We continue to monitor for concerns about China. Our investment review is known as CFIUS. We just try to help out our neighbors to the south.
Kudlow says China's action on Hong Kong is unpardonable. He also says President Trump is exceedingly disappointed with how China handled the pandemic with its lack of transparency, and that if China came clean earlier, more lives would have been saved in the US, South America, and Europe. Phil Zhou, NTD News.
An American Thought Leaders host Jan Jekielek sits down with former Congressman Dave Brat. He's now the dean at Liberty University's School of Business. They discuss the US and China, including the prospect of economic decoupling.
A lot of people here are saying this word that strikes fear into the hearts of many. Decoupling. Some sort of complete separation. Right. Definitely not something that a lot of free market folk would be thinking about very often. What are your thoughts on America decoupling from the Chinese economy?
Yeah, well, the way I go at it is fairly simple. There's a virus that came from Wuhan, China. It's caused deaths in the tens of hundreds of thousands in our country. We would like to know the DNA makeup and structure of that virus. We would like to know the source, where it come from, and the information so we can help find a vaccine to fix that. So in my view, if China is even in the realm of being a civilized country, you say, China, we would like to come in, we want to investigate that lab, talk to your people, because we want to solve that problem. If they say no to that proposition, you absolutely decouple 100%. Bye-bye, right? And that tariffs is this big, right? Tariffs a few $100 billion. The financial sector going through Wall Street is in the trillions, right? So that one, and China's cooked. And China, I was hinting with the Beige Book that they're hurting a little bit. And one sign that they're hurting, they were moving toward a consumption economy, right? That's their goal. And the investment piece, the government investment piece, worn out its welcome. They got skyscrapers all over the place. You build the first airport, the rate of return's okay, and then the second one is lower, and then the third one you're broke. So they're at their end run. And now the sign that tells me they're weak and scared that the word's getting out is Hong Kong. And I think they're willing to give up Hong Kong. And Hong Kong isn't just some little trading port, right? That's their dollar mechanism. That's how they get dollars in the trillions to fund the CCP. And so if they're willing to give up Hong Kong as a dollar trading hub, that tells me they're looking internal. And they're going to go, and that's even scarier, right? A CCP that's internal repressive is just scary beyond comprehension. But that's a little indicator that if they're willing to give up Hong Kong and the external trade routes, et cetera, and the full external that made them rich, they may be looking inward way too much in a sign of weakness.
You can watch the full interview on American Thought Leaders tonight at 7:30 p.m. Eastern and again tomorrow at 2 p.m. Eastern. And still to come this evening, the U.S. rolls back regulations to reduce methane emissions from the oil and gas industry. And a San Francisco district attorney files an injunction against food delivery service DoorDash. It's to reclassify DoorDash contractors as employees. That and more after the break.
When you look at TV networks in America, a soundbite and bite-it-out culture prevails on news and commentary programs. As a Canadian, I'm fascinated with America, and I wanted to offer American thought leaders an opportunity to share their thoughts in a deep dive format where we can explore their ideas together. And so American Thought Leaders was born. The world's most brilliant thinkers believed that open discourse was the key to greatness. However, all around the world, we see that discourse is being stifled and political agendas have subverted media. The Epoch Times launched its Global Thought Leaders program to bring back this great tradition of free thought. As the host of American Thought Leaders, every week I interview some of the most intriguing minds on the most pressing issues of our time. Be sure to check out our new episodes every week.
What does it mean to devote your life to the truth? Does it mean investigating communist subversion here in America? Does it mean exposing the deadly fentanyl crisis in the Midwest? We're spending late nights and covering deep government corruption. Does it mean persevering over 20 years, even after 4 masked men set one of our printing presses on fire last year? Because at a time when America's traditional values are under attack, it's the responsibility of righteous journalists to uphold truth and tradition.
The Trump administration is lifting Obama-era regulations on methane. It says it will help spur economic growth, but some environmental groups say they'll challenge the rollbacks in court.
The Trump administration is rolling back regulations aimed at reducing methane emissions from oil and gas operations. It's the latest move to unwind environmental rules and create industry growth. The Environmental Protection Agency is formally lifting 2016 Obama-era limits on oil and gas emissions. It's expected to keep some rules from 2012 but deregulate sources of emissions like transport and storage of oil and gas, as well as requirements for companies to install equipment to detect methane leaks. It would also prevent any future regulation of methane from facilities built before 2015. Environmental groups say the move comes as scientific reports highlight the role methane emissions play in affecting climate change. The American Petroleum Institute, a powerful fossil fuel lobby, has said it supports the final rule, but some of its larger members like Exxon, BP and Shell have called for mandatory methane regulations. Smaller drillers say the rule is too costly for them to comply with. Some environmental groups and state attorney generals have said they will challenge the rollbacks in court.
And the United States has decided not to increase tariffs on Airbus or European goods. It's after a years-old dispute between the US and the European Union over airplane subsidies.
The U.S. government says it's holding off on threats to increase tariffs on European goods in its long-running dispute over aircraft subsidies. It will maintain 15% tariffs on Airbus aircraft and 25% tariffs on other European goods. U.S. Trade Representative Robert Lighthizer said the European Union still hasn't come into compliance with World Trade Organization decisions, and Washington will start a new process to try to reach a long-term solution. The European Commission acknowledged the U.S. decision not to exacerbate the dispute, and that EU Trade Commissioner Phil Hogan will continue talks with Lighthizer to reach a settlement. The dispute between Airbus and Boeing started 16 years ago. Washington accused Britain, France, Spain, and Germany of giving illegal subsidies to European playmaker Airbus. Last month, Airbus said it would increase loan repayments to France and Spain in a final bid to reverse U.S. tariffs. And the U.S. declared itself in full compliance with the WTO findings in May, when Washington state abolished tax breaks that largely benefited Boeing. The EU is waiting for approval from the WTO to hit back with its own tariffs over the U.S. subsidies for Boeing.
A San Francisco prosecutor has filed an injunction against food delivery service DoorDash. The order states employees are being illegally defined as contractors. DoorDash is the U.S. market leader in food delivery. The injunction will force the company to reclassify its workers as employees as opposed to contractors. This action comes days after Uber and Lyft received a similar injunction. Reclassification would mean providing drivers with health care benefits, sick pay, and even paid leave. We've all heard about the president's TikTok ban. Now, Nebraska is banning TikTok on all state devices. It's the first state-level action against the Chinese app.
Nebraska Governor Pete Ricketts says Nebraska is banning TikTok on all state devices because of security concerns. He said the Chinese government has long engaged in systematic covert efforts to access sensitive data from U.S. governments, companies, and individuals. As an app owned by a company based in China, TikTok is legally obligated to provide data from its users to the country's communist regime upon request. Governor Ricketts said they made the decision to maintain the security of data owned by the state of Nebraska. Nebraska appears to be the first to ban TikTok at the state level. The Pentagon and the Departments of State and Homeland Security have also ordered personnel to delete the app from government devices. Security research firm Penetrum said in a report that TikTok does an excessive amount of data harvesting. And cyber experts say the app acts as spyware for the Chinese Communist regime. TikTok has denied the allegations. President Trump issued a ban on the app earlier this month, saying it has to be sold to an American company by September 15th, or else it will be shut down.
And the new report shows that Chinese tech giant Huawei built a data center for the government of Papua New Guinea. But during its construction, the telecom company created security loopholes on purpose so that data could be stolen.
2 years ago, Chinese telecom giant Huawei built a data center for the government of Papua New Guinea, or PNG. Because of that, the Pacific Ocean was in deep debt to a Chinese state-owned bank, who funded the Huawei project. Now, the data center was found to have serious security vulnerabilities, leaving PNG government data open for spying. A new report by the Australian Strategic Policy Institute suggested that Huawei deliberately created the security loopholes to help China spy on the country. According to an Australian media report, the firewalls and codes Huawei built for PNG government to encrypt their data had already reached their end of life in 2016, 2 years before the center opened. The Australian report is the first to document Huawei's involvement in Beijing's cyber espionage activities. The PNG government hired Huawei 2 years ago despite strong opposition from the US, Japan, and Australia. The country's official at the time said whatever views Australia or the US might have in relation to cybersecurity, as far as Huawei or China are concerned, those are for the big boys to worry about. We in PNG have no enemies. We would not be that stupid to reject it. Now the country is struggling to repay the $53 million loan to China and seeking funds from Australia to fix the dysfunctional data center. Responding to the report, China's foreign ministry called the report slandering Chinese companies and said that they strongly oppose it. Penny Zhou, NTD News.
And China's largest state-run banks operating in Hong Kong are taking steps to comply with U.S. sanctions on 11 city officials. They're trying to safeguard access to crucial dollar funding and overseas networks. Bloomberg reports that major Chinese lenders with operations in the U.S. have turned cautious in opening new accounts for the sanctioned officials, and some lenders have banned transactions via the U.S. The sanctions forbid banks from doing business with the 11 officials. Hong Kong's de facto central bank has tried to ease concerns. It said Hong Kong lenders have no obligation to follow U.S. sanctions, but J.P. Morgan analysts in Hong Kong say banks with U.S. operations may still need to consider their U.S. compliance obligations. And still to come, back-to-school spending is expected to hit record levels. Fortunately, there are ways to save money. Find out how after the break.
He ascended to the throne during the most turbulent times in the Joseon dynasty. Despite that, he treated his people well, had great ambitions, and led the country towards a new renaissance. That eventually earned him the title as one of the wisest kings in Korean history. Lee Sun on NTD America.
The pandemic could push back-to-school spending to record levels, so we have some tips to help you save some money.
Whether it's back to the classroom or back home with a computer, this school year will be like no other. With all the uncertainty, the National Retail Federation says parents with children in elementary through high school plan to spend nearly $790 on average, topping last year's record of expected spending. But there are ways to save. First, shop now. Back to school sales in the first week in September, and buy extra supplies, says Jenny Martin of the Southern Savers website.
it's going to save you a lot come spring when nothing is on sale.
Martin says this time of year you'll find prices that beat Black Friday on things like printers and computers. Some sites offer refurbished models which can save big bucks. And don't forget those coupons.
Target and Staples are both offering 15% off coupons when you register on their website as a teacher, and it is available for homeschool parents.
Spend more for quality on some things like binders and book bags. Some companies offer lifetime warranties. Don't shell out for your child's favorite character. You'll pay for that. And know what your child needs for school.
Chromebook versus a laptop, you're talking about a $300 difference. So don't just jump off trying to grab the best laptop that you can. Really just focus on what they need.
That's the latest business updates for today. Thank you for tuning in. We'll see you tomorrow.